In the frigid depths of the North Pacific, beneath miles of dark water, the wreck of the Eibonis lay undisturbed for nearly a century. It was only in recent years, during a deep-sea exploration by the Mariana Institute of Oceanic Studies, that the shipwreck was discovered. The Eibonis was a legend in maritime lore, its sudden disappearance and the mystery of its final voyage sparking rumors for generations. No distress signal had ever been received, and despite several large-scale searches, the ship had vanished without a trace in 1927. The discovery of the wreck was a shock to historians, and the findings on board would lead to more questions than answers. The Eibonis was found resting on a steep slope in the depths, tilted at an angle as if frozen mid-sink. Inside, the submersible's cameras revealed remnants of decayed furniture, corroded fixtures, and a strange series of symbols etched into the walls. But it was the discovery of a tattered, leather-bound journal in the captain's quarters that would become the most chilling find. The journal, identified as belonging to a passenger named Sean Rooney, was surprisingly well preserved in a locked drawer beneath the captain's desk. Each page, filled with notes and observations in an increasingly frantic hand, chronicled the horrors Rooney experienced in the ship's final days. His entries described the supernatural occurrences, the strange behavior of the crew, and his ultimate realization that the Eibonis had been intended as an offering of sorts. Its passengers and crew sacrificed to something lying in wait beneath the waves. Marine archaeologists and historians have dated the wreck to approximately 97 years ago, estimating that the Eibonis had sunk within hours of Rooney's last journal entry. The journal has since been preserved under careful archival conditions, its contents a haunting glimpse into the mind of a man facing certain doom, and into a voyage that was doomed from the start.
Day 1. My name is Sean Rooney. A week ago, I stepped onto the deck of the SS Eibonis to sail across the Pacific Ocean, a journey I hadn't planned for, let alone desired. My name appeared on the passenger list through some bizarre stroke of luck, a contest I don't recall entering, but the ticket was real enough. The other passengers were a curious assortment of characters, each with their own story, and we all seemed to share the same bewilderment about our unexpected fortune. But for the first 6 days, none of that mattered. The ship's luxury, the grandeur of the dining rooms, and the perfect views of the endless ocean lulled us all into a sense of peace and indulgence. We ate, drank, and laughed as though nothing could disturb the serenity. That illusion shattered last night. I fell ill after dinner, a sudden violent nausea that drove me back to my cabin earlier than usual. The food tasted fine, rich and delicate, but something about it clung to my stomach with a vile intensity. As I lay in my bunk, darkness closed in fast, and I drifted into a dreamless, restless sleep. When I awoke, everything had changed. The ship is a graveyard. Every single soul, passenger and crew alike, lies dead. Their faces contorted in fear or agony, though no wounds marked their bodies. I found them sprawled across hallways, slumped over tables, and still clutching the objects of their final moments. What killed them? There is no sign of struggle, no sounds of panic. Just a silence so thick, it presses on my skull. The only signs of violence are the symbols, painted in ink, blood, and something else I can't identify. They snake across the walls, around door frames, on ceilings. Spirals, sharp angles, unfamiliar sigils that twist the mind if I look too long. They feel alive, as if the patterns themselves are breathing, whispering. There's a stench in the air now, thick and cloying, like incense mixed with decay. It seeps into my skin, my clothes, and with each breath it grows heavier. Every corner of the ship carries this oppressive weight, a presence, ancient and indifferent, as though something long asleep is stirring, slowly waking from eons of slumber. I've tried to send out distress calls. Nothing works. The engines are dead. and the horizon remains eerily empty. No land, no ships, nothing but an endless stretch of water. I'm trapped on the Eibonis, floating aimlessly in this forsaken ocean. There's no real chance of making it back. Even if I could repair the engines, I'm not sure I would want to. My head pounds with questions, but there are no answers here, only death and shadows. I have no choice but to investigate, to uncover what has happened. Something drove everyone on this ship to madness or death, and I fear that whatever it is, it's not finished. It watches. I can feel it. Every step I take, it draws closer. Something wants me to see, to understand. But I don't want to. I'm not ready for what's coming. Day 2. I found a sketch pad today, buried under the wreckage in what was once a passenger's cabin. The owner must have fancied themselves a naturalist, judging by the meticulous drawings of birds, fish, and other creatures of the sea. But one sketch, one horrifying sketch, has gripped my mind. It resembles a jellyfish, but not quite. The body is translucent, rippling with too many tendrils, all of which twist in impossible, unnatural ways. The eyes, if they are eyes, are like dark pits that seem to follow me even now as I write. Every line is just faintly wrong, as if the artist tried to capture something beyond human comprehension. The longer I look at it, the more it seems to shift, as though the thing on the page wants to crawl free. Last night, my dreams were a chaotic mess, barely more than flashes of nightmare. I saw cities beneath the ocean, blackened and forgotten, where impossible angles stretched into the dark water. In other flashes, there were burned landscapes, vast and empty, as if all life had been scorched away. And over it all there was a terrible presence, enormous, formless, but undeniably watching. I woke drenched in sweat. The image of a single staring eye burned into my thoughts. I feel its gaze even now. As if things weren't strange enough, the ship's water tastes wrong. There's a metallic tang to it, one that makes me shudder with revulsion. I instinctively know it isn't safe, but I have no other options. Somehow the taste pulls my mind in strange directions, like the memory of stars glittering in the void, an endless sea of nothingness between them. It terrifies me. I feel like something in me is slipping. There's no escape from the dread that lingers on this ship. The engines are still down, the smell of incense clings to everything, and the bloodstains never seem to fade. Time feels meaningless here. Something is watching, waiting. Day 3. The ship's larders were one of the first places I thought to check today. After only 2 days of scrapping meals together, the cupboards and pantries are nearly empty. There's no way they stocked this ship for a long journey. The supplies are sparse, barely enough to sustain a handful of people, let alone a full passenger and crew complement. The conclusion is unavoidable. This was always meant to be a one-way voyage. The food I managed to salvage is already starting to go bad in this damp, oppressive air. The rot clings to everything, aided by the ship's pervasive decay. I found a small cache of salt, though it's hardly enough. I've tried rubbing down the remaining meat and fish with it, hoping to slow the inevitable spoilage. There's also a dry storage compartment near the galley, and I've moved as much as I can there, hoping the cooler, drier air might delay the rot. But each bite I take feels like a betrayal, a bitter reminder of how quickly I'm running out of time and resources. While searching for food, I stumbled upon yet another body, but this one was different. Unlike the others, who seemed to have simply collapsed in death's silent grip, this crew member had been stabbed in the back. The wound was vicious and unmistakable, cutting through their uniform and staining it dark red. Why this one? Was it a passenger who turned on them, angered by some betrayal, or perhaps it was a fellow crew member who couldn't bear the plan they had set into motion? Maybe they had second thoughts and wanted out. It's hard to imagine anyone aboard that night wasn't gripped by fear. The thought lingers in my mind. Was there a brief, desperate struggle before the end, some final spark of human resistance? After hours of scavenging, sifting through the grime and ruin of the engine room, I managed to get the engines running again. They sputtered and groaned, almost as if resentful of my efforts, but finally they turned over, and the Eibonis lurched forward in the water. It's a hollow victory. There's no escape, not really. But steering the ship gives me some small illusion of control, a way to direct this nightmare even if I can't wake from it. Still, with the engines alive, I have choices now. I can try to head toward land, though there's no telling how far away it might be. Or I could turn the ship in search of some other signal, some faint glimmer of rescue, or perhaps answers. The thought of steering away from all of this is tempting, but that presence I felt on day one remains, gnawing at me, urging me not to turn away. The night is creeping in, the symbols on the walls shifting in the dimming light. I know I'll dream of them again. Day 4. Today, I walked through the corridors, moving steadily through the winding hallways, and yet, somehow, I kept finding myself back where I began. Every passage looks the same flickering lights and symbols, but the walls seem to close in tighter, bending and stretching in impossible ways. It's as though the ship itself is watching, guiding me back, holding me in place. It defies sense, a twisted loop I cannot break, no matter how many turns I take. I begin to feel like a rat in a maze, one whose exit keeps shifting just out of reach. In one of the deepest holds, I found something that shook me to my core. Piled high among refuse and tattered rags are bones, some clearly human, others close but disturbingly wrong. A jawbone too wide, an arm bone twisted, joints that don't quite connect in any way I can understand. Whatever happened here was worse than anything I'd imagined. I gathered what fragments I could, placing them carefully to form something that resembled order. I don't know what drove me to do it, an attempt at dignity, perhaps. But as I stacked the bones, I murmured a few words, some hollow, instinctive prayer. I don't know who or what I was praying to. Everyone on board was connected to this horror. The symbols, the blood, the rituals. It's clear the passengers were more than travelers. Each of us was drawn here by some unseen thread, chosen by this cult for reasons I can't fathom. But me, why am I here? I didn't seek this, didn't ask for any part of it. And yet, perhaps something in me, some forgotten action or encounter, marked me, made me worthy of this ship, this fate. I don't know what sins or secrets have tethered me to this place, but it's too late to pull free now. Whatever they saw in me, they chose well. I am theirs. And then, there's him. A passenger in black, a man whose face I can't shake. He was an enigma, dressed in a dark coat that seemed to drink in the light, with a sardonic smile and eyes that held a bottomless, horrible knowledge. His words were few, but he watched, took everything in. Now, as I search through this floating tomb, his is the only body I cannot find. It haunts me. I feel him, as if he's just around each corner, waiting, watching. I wonder if, even now, he lingers in the shadows, biding his time. In the cold, clinical air of the doctor's quarters, I discovered a grim tableau. Shattered vials, rusted scalpels, and gore-stained gloves tell the story of a twisted purpose. But it's the tables, the rows of jars with strange, unnameable specimens inside, flesh too pale, parts too small, that reveal his true work. The doctor was experimenting, pushing beyond any line of morality. Whatever he was searching for, he found answers in blood and suffering. His tools were carelessly abandoned, as if he was taken before he could clean up his final horror. Each table, each tool feels coated with the memories of the terror his patients must have endured. Tonight I awoke to the entire ship shuddering. It felt like we were no longer gliding through water, but caught, shaken like a toy in the hand of a child. For a moment I was sure we would capsize, but just as suddenly, the sensation stopped, leaving a hollow, sickly calm in its wake. Whatever stirred beneath the surface, whatever monstrous thing moves in the depths, it has become aware of me. I'm sure of it now. Day 5. Today, I found the body of a young child, the daughter of one of the crew. Her small frame lay crumpled against the wall, a look of frozen terror on her face. But it wasn't the child's death that hit me hardest. It was the memory of her voice, of her soft words from just days ago. She had tugged on my sleeve in the dining hall, eyes wide and full of curiosity. "Do you think the stars can watch us, mister?" she had asked, her voice bright with innocent wonder. I remember it so clearly, because it was the first question anyone had asked me on this trip that felt honest, untainted by the suffocating air of secrecy around us. I told her yes, maybe the stars were watching us, and I hoped they'd keep her safe on this dark, empty sea. The irony now is cruel beyond words. I think back to that moment, her wide-eyed wonder, and I feel the sharp edge of my failure, as if I'd somehow promised her a safety I could never give. And now she's dead, likely by the hand of her own parent. What drove them to it, I can only imagine, but whatever it was, it broke whatever bond should have held parent to child. Later, I broke into the map room. I thought that if I could pinpoint our location, maybe I'd gain some sense of control, some faint illusion of direction. But the scene that greeted me dashed that hope. The navigator's body lay sprawled over the map table, throat slit in a ragged line that stretched from ear to ear. His eyes stared at nothing, blank and empty, as if they had seen too much. The chart was ruined, soaked in a dark, tacky stain of blood that obscured all sense of our position. I tried to wipe it away, to salvage anything I could, but it was no use. Every mark, every coordinate, was smeared beyond recognition. Without the map, I am lost. The ship drifts without destination, carrying me deeper into whatever madness lies ahead. And yet, I can't shake the feeling that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, that every inch of this drifting journey has been orchestrated by something far beyond my understanding. Day 6, I am not supposed to be here. Every step I take in these corridors, every breath I draw, it feels as though I'm intruding upon something far beyond my comprehension, as if I am stepping too close to an invisible cliff's edge. The veil over my mind, the thin film of ignorance that shields me from madness, is slipping, worn thin by days of horror and dread. I can feel it peeling back, and I know that if I pull any harder, if I allow my mind to probe too far, it will crack open, leaving me naked to the unbearable truth lurking behind it. To keep myself from slipping further, I've taken to dulling my senses, blurring the edges of thought. I found a few bottles of whiskey and gin in the passenger lounge. Their contents burn my throat and offer a brief, numb reprieve from this gnawing dread. Each sip blurs the lines between reality and nightmare, just enough to keep me grounded, or at least tethered. With each drink, the symbols on the walls fade, the twisting, pulsing shapes blur, and for a moment I can pretend I am somewhere else, somewhere where none of this exists. But the illusion is fleeting. I am so small here, so inconsequential. There is something approaching, something vast and timeless. I can't see it, but I feel its presence, bending the very fabric of reality as it draws near, a weight so profound that it presses down on my mind, crushing me with its magnitude. I am a speck, less than a speck, in the shadow of this entity. Hiding from it is impossible, but instinct takes hold. I've taken to curling up in dark, cramped spaces, supply closets, narrow alcoves, anywhere the shadows can cover me. I cling to these small, enclosed places, making myself as small as possible, hoping that if I remain still, This thing might pass me by, might overlook me in its indifference. Today, under the first mate's bunk, I found a small, heavy chest covered in a layer of dust. Inside, rows of dark glass vials gleamed dully in the dim light, each filled with thick, murky liquids. The labels are nearly worn away, the writing faded and cryptic, but the symbols, the crude shapes drawn on each bottle, hint at something dark. There's a collection of syringes, too, lying beside the vials, long and sharp, their metal dulled with age and rust, but still gleaming with a sinister intent. The vials reek of something unnatural, something that crawls under my skin just holding them. I don't know what the first mate was doing with these, but part of me wonders if these fluids, these twisted alchemical concoctions, were meant as a shield against whatever haunts this ship. Or perhaps they were a means to hasten an escape from the horror, a darker mercy for those who couldn't bear another day. I don't know yet if I'll use them, but having them nearby feels like a small, grim comfort. Day 7. Today, I stumbled upon the body of yet another crew member, but this one was different. His face was almost human, but not quite. His eyes were set a little too far apart, his nose a bit too flat, his mouth twisted at an unnatural angle. The skin was sallow, and his hair was coarse, almost like wiry threads rather than hair. I couldn't stop staring, torn between revulsion and fascination. In the low, flickering light, he reminded me of the deep-sea creatures I once read about, those twisted, alien things that survive in places light never touches. Whatever changed this man left him trapped in a place between human and something else, something aquatic, as though he belonged not to the world above the waves, but to the dark, endless depths below. This evening, as I walked along the railing, I heard a sound that froze me in my tracks. At first I thought it was the hum of the ocean, the wind whipping against the hull. But then the sound grew distinct, unmistakable. A chant, low and bubbling, as though voices were rising up from beneath the surface. The words were garbled, inhuman, distorted by the water. I couldn't make out a single phrase, yet I felt each syllable vibrating in my bones, a primordial echo calling from the abyss. I gripped the railing, peering down into the black water, but saw nothing. And yet, I felt as though the chant was directed at me, or perhaps at the ship itself, some ancient summoning that I was never meant to hear. Afterward, I searched the ship, hoping for some way out, some last chance of escape. I made my way to the lifeboats, only to find them gone, every last one. Each rope had been cut, each boat freed to drift away into the endless ocean. I imagine them now, tiny dots bobbing on the vast water, their passengers, if any, left to float aimlessly, lost forever in the trackless expanse. Any hope of escape has vanished. I am bound to this ship, adrift on the abyss with no means of escape. The chanting still echoes in my mind, and I wonder now if it's meant to draw me closer, to lure me deeper into this nightmare. Day 8. I wandered through the hold today, sorting through the scattered remnants of what once belonged to us, the passengers. Among the chaos, I came across something unexpected, one of my own suitcases. I'd been told it had been lost while we boarded, that it had fallen overboard or gone missing somehow, but here it was, torn open and tossed aside like garbage. Inside, most of my belongings were either damaged or missing, but one item stood out, an old leather notebook I'd kept tucked at the bottom. Now it was marked, its cover painted with strange symbols in a sickly shade of green, symbols that twisted and curved in ways I didn't recognize, yet they stirred something in the back of my mind, as if they held a meaning just beyond my grasp. I don't know who defaced it or why, but the symbols left a residual chill, like a fingerprint pressed into my thoughts. I can't shake the feeling that whoever did this intended to send a message, a warning, perhaps, or a claim. Later, in one of the passenger cabins, I found another grim scene. A man lay face down on the floor, a deep, fatal wound between his shoulders, the blood dried in a dark pool around him. When I searched his pockets, I found a wallet with a badge and identification for an agency I'd never heard of. The emblem on the badge was an odd one, vaguely familiar, yet entirely foreign, an intricate design of intersecting lines and symbols that I couldn't place. Whoever he wasn't an ordinary passenger. He had been something else, something hidden. Did he know what he was stepping into when he boarded this ship? Or had he, like me, been dragged here by forces beyond his control? In another corridor, I stumbled upon the scene of a brutal struggle. One passenger lay dead, surrounded by the bodies of half a dozen crew members, each dispatched with a kind of desperate precision. Blood spattered the walls and pooled beneath the bodies, evidence of the violent stand this passenger had made. Whoever they were, they fought with everything they had, unwilling to give in to the madness sweeping over the ship. But why? What could drive a person to resist with such fury in the face of certain death? Perhaps they thought they could escape, or maybe they believed they could end whatever horror had taken root here. Or maybe they knew what lay in wait for them if they surrendered and chose to face death on their own terms rather than fall into the hands of whatever twisted ritual the crew had planned. The symbols from my notebook, the badge in the dead man's wallet, the resistance of this lone fighter. It all points to something deeper, something vast and incomprehensible. Each piece is a fragment of a larger puzzle, one that's pulling me in, whether I want to be part of it or not. Day 9. The ship is failing. Today, I found a large crack in the side of the hull, a jagged wound slowly seeping seawater into the lower levels. Each drop feels like a heartbeat, a steady, grim pulse marking the last moments of this cursed vessel. I tried to patch it, piling rags and scraps of cloth, even metal fragments from the galley, pressing everything I could find against the breach. But it's no use. The sea is relentless, an unstoppable force inching ever closer. The water trickles faster with each hour, and I know now that this ship is not meant to survive, nor am I. As the night wears on, the ship groans and shudders beneath me, its bones creaking in the cold dark, sinking with a sluggish inevitability into the abyss below. I sit alone now, the faint flicker of a dying lantern casting feeble shadows on the walls, writing this final entry by the last of its light. The water rises steadily, lapping now at my feet, filling the air with the salt and cold of the depths waiting to swallow us whole. I find myself thinking of the life that might have been, the things I will never see. I had hoped to see the world, to stand on shores far from home and feel the warmth of distant sunrises, to marvel at the strange wonders of new places. I wanted to find purpose, something more meaningful than drifting from place to place. I had dreams of love, of building a life not haunted by shadows. It feels surreal now, these fragments of a life I'll never know, slipping away as surely as the light. If anyone should find this, know that I tried, though it was never enough. This ship, this forsaken vessel, claimed us all in the end. I feel the cold rising higher now, pulling me into its quiet embrace. And as the lantern finally fades, the shadows close in, bearing me down into the endless dark. May the stars above remember us, even if no one else ever does. Last survivor of the Eibonis, Sean Rooney.
Thanks for joining us for Ebb Tide, the Last Voyage of the Eibonis. If you enjoyed this eerie journey and want to explore even more of the story, or perhaps try the game out for yourself, be sure to visit Stephen Kohler's itch.io page at the link in the description. There, you'll find everything you need to bring this haunting adventure to life in your own way.